So I think we'll help everyone just get seated again for the second part of this plenary session panel. Excellent. So we had an opportunity to do a deep dive here on Greater Copenhagen, and we hope that those coming from internationally learned a little bit more about how things work here, and that the folks that are from Greater Copenhagen got a chance to hear what are sort of the calls for the next level to take the collaboration even further. So now we're going to jump to some international experiences, and so I just want to quickly introduce our international panel and have them jump in here. So I want to introduce Eliane de Molen-Schneiders, who is a regional minister from the province of Limburg in the Netherlands. Welcome. Thank you so much, Eliane, for coming here. We have Matt Morrison, who is right here to my left, Executive Director of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, representing the U.S. and Canada as part of that region. We have Ricardo Ferreira, who is coordinator in the border focal point at the acronym DG Regio, so in the Directorate General for Regional Policy here at the European Commission. And we also have Ralph Elma, who is the Director of Nord Regio, but who's actually a native son of the Greater Copenhagen region, so he can share some of his experiences as well before the bridge was built, as I understand. So, excellent. So we'll just kick into this first round of discussions. Matt, you're coming from the farthest away, I think, for our panel here. So the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, it actually covers many U.S. states and Canadian provinces. It's quite a large area, but you also have a second hat, which is looking at the innovation corridor, sort of between Seattle and Vancouver. And so this is an area that has very rural spaces, but also very high-tech urban hubs. So maybe you could just share for the group here a little bit about what is this economic region, why was it created, what are sort of the main objectives you have for this collaboration cross-border?
Thank you so much, Karen. The EU was our inspiration in the 80s. We saw economic integration as one of the most important things. In the Pacific Northwest are 5 states: Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and then British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Northwest Territories, and the Yukon. We are each other's largest trading partners. The economic watersheds flow north and south, not east and west. And we needed an organization to look at the cross-border areas. Mm-hmm. And I am also the border chair of the Cascadia Innovation Corridor, which seeks to link up Seattle and Vancouver, BC, and Portland, Oregon. And there are many, many issues that we are looking at related to the first panel. Housing, our transportation system, and we are getting ready for the FIFA World Cup that will be in Canada, US, and Mexico, and we have a lot to fix before that happens. But as putting on my Penwar hat, we have 18 different working groups that are co-chaired by ministers and senators in the states and also business leaders. So it's a very interesting public-private engine. These working groups meet every month, and they are constantly looking at the challenges and barriers that are common. And these working groups are every key industry sector. So rural areas like agriculture, also water policy, environment, energy, transportation. And with our 35-year history, the federal governments have realized that we're actually creating solutions that they can implement. So in the beginning, we didn't want the feds to come, but now they come. Congressional members and also federal ministers and attend our summits, which every year are 600 to 700 key legislators, business leaders, addressing in these 18 working groups, what are the solutions and recommendations that we need to happen? So it's been, I've been doing this a long time, and when I reflect on the last 25 years, it's building these relationships, having regular meetings that people know they'll have a chance to talk with their counterparts, to address the challenges and the things that bother them about the other side of the border. And those friendships and the trust is absolutely essential.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point, I think, to highlight. And when in some of the work that the OECD has done on cross-border, this, who puts in the money in, are they getting out exactly what they put in, things like that. And so you've created through these working groups this sense of continuity and trust that then helps with airing out whatever issues need to be aired out, so you can focus on the common objectives. It seems to be, and it's been over decades that this has been in place. So that's, do you see that individual champions, is it the structure that helps, or is it individual champions, or a combination of the both in making this work?
I think it's definitely a combination of the both, but it's gratifying to me to see the federal government's now investing. So we are, for example, the first and only regional infrastructure accelerator for the US DOT, looking at how do we actually create, looking at the future of hydrogen and electrification on transportation. We're doing a lot of planning on how do we transport hydrogen? How are we going to get the trucking services to actually, it's a chicken and egg. The infrastructure has to be there. And that's been very gratifying. On the coast, we are the cleanest economies in America between British Columbia and Washington State. And the green transition is a huge focus of what we're trying to do.
Great, and I think it has some nice parallels here with where we are in Greater Copenhagen. This important accent on a sustainable cross-border area and benefiting from that integration. Eliane, the province of Limburg in the Netherlands, and if for any of our guests who don't know, please look it up right away on your phone, because the geography of the borders of the province of Limburg, I think, will help explain why cross-border is part of your daily lives in the province of Limburg. So could you tell us, Eliane, a little bit more about how you work in a cross-border way in the province, and what are sort of the sort of institutions or ways of working that you've set up that you think are very successful for the province of Limburg and its residents?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the OECD for the invitation to share our examples and the visions that we are working on. I often say Limburg, I'm Dutch, we are Dutch, we're part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, but actually we are the most un-Dutch province of Limburg, of the Netherlands. And also reflecting on the formal panel between Sweden and Denmark, I live close to the border, to the Belgian border. I live very close to the capital of Maastricht, which was the capital where the European Union, the Treaty of the European Union was signed. So, we are a little bit the most un-Dutch province of the Netherlands. I always say we are the balcony towards Europe. If we, in these border regions, we are no strangers for each other. So you have the same villages, you have the same dialect, you have the same culture, you have the same carnival, you have the same things you do at your parties in the villages. But some are German, some are Belgian, some are Walloon, and some are Dutch, but we are the same. We are people from that region. And what happens then is that there are hard lines in that region, and that creates, things that you need to think of. And I would like to express that with an example of my own son, who is very much likes everything that has to do with cars. Like he was a little child, he studied Automotive engineering, he fell in love with a Belgian girl, 9 kilometers from our village, but there is border in between. They bought a house in Belgium, and where do you go then as an automotive engineer to work? Usually you go to Germany. So that's horror for health insurance, for taxes, for everything. But he's young, so he always says, Mama, don't bother me with all kinds of things. Yes, you become 40, you become 50 years, maybe, hopefully, and then. So, but actually that means that if you want to live in an area, you want to do what you would like to do, that you want to be, like the Swedish say, you want to achieve this situation of hygge, to have broad prosperity, to do the work you love, to have the partner you love, to live on a place where you feel well, then the border can hinder you. Well, a long time ago, people recognized that in our region, and that is why there is a legal person, a legal vehicle drafted according to European law, the EGTC, European Groupement for Territorial Cooperation. It's located in Eupen, and if you see our region, it's not so large as the region which was explained here between Denmark and Sweden, but there live 4.5 million inhabitants. So it's highly dense, which also means that things with regard to labor market are very extreme important for us. And then you have the borders. And actually we have 5 countries. You have in Belgium as a federal government, so we have the Flemish government, we have the Walloon government, we have the East German government, we have the North Rhine-Westphalia government, and we have the Dutch government. And we have 3 languages that are very much different from each other. So the Dutch and the German, that's a little bit similar, and the Flemish people as well. But in the Walloon area, they speak French, and that's a completely different language. So you have a very dense area, a small area, you have 5 countries and 3 languages. And unless that, we don't see each other as foreigners. We feel that we have a connection. And if I am in my region, unless that are actually on paper foreigners, I feel very more connected with those people than people in The Hague and in Amsterdam. So, but it's always important to express on that ministerial level the reality where we live in. And when I became minister a year ago, I said, okay, stop focusing on problems, stop focusing on things that cannot work. I would like to turn thinking, so turn it around, what are the chances? So one of the things we say, okay, how can the border be a chance? Well, one of the examples is in 2030, the European Commission said all master students need to have an experience abroad. There are 5 universities, top universities in our region. So can you create joint programs? And you find problems on the way. But if you focus on the chances, you have another dynamics and another energy and another inspiration to say, okay, well, that is a border, we cannot do it. So that is, well, the new energy we would like to bring in our beautiful region.
Great, and I think we heard in the last panel also this positive narrative is really something that can help inspire as people work away at some of the administrative challenges that come up. Maybe turning to you, Rolf, I mean, at Nordregio you do a lot of research that tries to assess the economic situation, the labor market situation. What are your assessments of sort of Greater Copenhagen within the broader Nordic space? What are some of the findings you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, let me start with Nordregio and the Nordic collaboration, because we think that the Nordics are a natural region. We share history, common geography. It's rather special compared to Europe. We have greater distances, we have water in between, and so on. And Nordregio was founded by the Nordic Council of Ministers to study what happens in the Nordics. Mm-hmm. So that's what we are doing there. And a good starting point is the biannual publication we produce called State of the Nordic Regions. If you're curious about what happens in the Nordic municipalities and regions, you can look up it in that place. But it's very interesting to compare Europe and the Nordics. You can say that the geography is both our friend and also our foe in some ways. In Greater Copenhagen, almost half of all daily commuting for work is done in the Greater Copenhagen area. Then we have the Swedish-Norway connection, also Finland, Sweden, and also via Åland, daily commute. But we should not, but it's not so many who are commuting. We heard 20,000 people around down here. And actually that number is rather stable, and we can see it's declining. And if you look at the migration between the Nordic countries, so a person born in one Nordic country, moving to another country, it's only around 40,000 people each year who move between Nordic countries. It's not so many. I think we can improve that a lot by being more integrated. Historically, we have been looking at push factors when we had seen these migrational flows between the Nordic countries. So in the end of the 60s, early 70s, we had a lot of people coming from Finland because of the low downturn in labor market there, coming to Sweden. But what we saw also that after a few years, a lot of them moved back. So they didn't, when the things got better in Finland, they moved back. They thought it was better. So how can we improve conditions? How can we, is it a housing condition? What kind of conditions can we construe so people are staying in the country where I migrate to? We had a second push in 1975 from Denmark to Sweden. After the oil crisis, we had a lot of people come from Denmark. But also then we saw a migration flow back. But we shouldn't forget about migration because since we have this geography in the Nordics, we don't have so many regions like the Greater Copenhagen where we have this dense, as you say, not any Limburgs in the Nordics. So we should, I think, work more and think about what can make people want to move between the Nordic countries and stay there. And could be education, universities, could be housing, attractive housing, what could be incentives, not relying on push factors. How can we increase the pull factors, making it then an addition in your CV to have been living in another Nordic country? I think that's an important thing to work with. On the other hand, we see that a lot of people in the Nordics are moving within their countries. So it's not a lack of people wanting to move. We are not, stable. I think it's almost 15% of Nordic inhabitants are moving within their country each year. So it's a lot of movement, more than in Europe as a whole. But between the countries, it's almost half, less than half than we see in the average numbers in Europe. So that's a very important factor. And we can see my own history is also a little bit of an example here. It used to be so that if you were trying to make a career in Sweden, you had to move to the capital. You couldn't see really opportunities on the other side, in Denmark, for example, or Norway. So you took a few years, dog years, as we call them, up in Stockholm. And I was doing that as well. And after a few years, I thought that the living conditions were better where I came from, here in Lund, close to Malmö. But then, of course, the number of interesting jobs was much higher in Copenhagen. So in the end of the 90s, I started to work in Copenhagen. That was before the bridge. So I was actually taking these speedboats, the hydrofoils, which was rather a tough challenge at the time. And we say that we who did that, we were more proper commutants. It's so easy today, so everybody could do it. But I think that's an important factor also, that you need to have the attractive labor markets, but also then encourage people to migrate, to have this integration, because we can't rely on just having commuting people all the time. That's a very important task. We have to continue to work with that, trying to create this fluidity over the borders. But I think also don't forget the migration.
Great. So, I mean, giving people the opportunity really to live and work where there are quality of life and jobs that are of interest. Ricardo, with the European Commission, you do a lot of work, and I know you have materials there, so colleagues can come up to Ricardo afterwards. I think he has some of that with him as well, just to understand, when you look across Europe at all the different cross-border collaborations, you know, a little bit about this region, you know, about some other cross-border regions. What are the kinds of efforts that, for example, the European Commission is taking to promote the cross-border collaboration, and then sort of the inspirations you've seen from other places that could be helpful here for Greater Copenhagen?
Perhaps we can start by a why. Why within the single market? This is a question we get very often. You have the single market. Why are you intervening? Have you not done it all? The answer to the why is easy. 2% of GDP. The cost that was being asked in the first panel, the cost for not having proper cross-border cooperation, 2% of GDP, which is a low-hanging fruit, if we simply solve 20% of existing border obstacles. 2% of GDP is not peanuts. We're talking about 1 million workers. In the question of the why, in the different experiences that we see, they look at us, we look at those issues from the perspective of the need to understand the territory as being local. What is your local market? What is home? What is your natural catchment area if you're a company? What is your functional area? You present it very well. It includes Germany, Maastricht in Belgium, in your case. Here it's very clear that the local aspect, local Copenhagen, my market includes Malmö. People come to Malmö for the restaurant. People go to Copenhagen for jobs. That's something that you do in your local territory. And the beauty of cross-border cooperation is precisely this, is that to complement the single market, we need to go a further level down in the territoriality scale, because the single market is built as a sum of 27, as a sum of nationals. And if we start looking at those details in many fields, let's take a simple example, healthcare. You can be traveling. If tomorrow I have an accident, I go to an hospital either in Malmö or in Copenhagen. I'm Portuguese, Belgian health insurance card. I have a European health insurance card covered by Belgium. I'm treated immediately. But if I live on the border and I simply want to go across the border to a simple doctor, not in an emergency situation, in both cases you are not reimbursed. You have significant problems of getting access to normal things in your daily life just across the border. And this is the beauty of it. The beauty of looking at cross-border cooperation is because it allows you to understand that we are missing a part of our territory. And this is precisely what we should be doing. We should be ensuring that in whatever function we have, we can take advantage of this territory, and this is where we have identified this 2% of GDP. More recent estimates point for 3% of GVA, gross value added, from the European Parliament, these estimates. And what we have been doing from the regional policy perspective is precisely this. We understand very well the call that was made in the beginning, in the first part of the panel, for more data. We understand the call for more awareness. And this is probably the key element. The key element is ensuring that decision makers are totally aware of the reality beyond the border, that the border is not a line dividing two territories. The border is a region that has a line in between. It's a totally different concept. And it's precisely on this line that we have been producing different mappings of cross-border interactions, that we have been pushing for solutions. And here we talk about the interesting stories. One of the interesting stories that we have is this initiative called B Solutions. B sounds badly. It's a bad branding, sounds the second best. The B in B Solutions stands for Border Solutions. with these B solutions, what we have been doing is we have a permanent call for proposals for border obstacles to be proposed to us. And to each of these border obstacles that we receive, we simply send one technical support to identify the legal root causes. And then we need to pass this solution that is identified to the national or regional competent authority. And lots of stories appear.
Great, thank you so much. And I know that you're working through many different programs to also just support more economic integration cross-border throughout the European space. Maybe we'll jump to a second round of questions because we have a lot of innovation-intensive examples here from our international panel. And Matt, the Cascadia Innovation Corridor, as you mentioned, really is trying to link up, you said, Vancouver, Seattle, and even into Portland. And, you know, for those not familiar, there's some pretty big firms and some pretty high-tech activities there. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you're using this sort of innovation corridor to, you know, help brand internationally, help promote innovation, and so maybe some lessons that Greater Copenhagen can learn from your activities there.
Well, we're calling it the mega region in Cascadia, and as Linus pointed out, we're all about the win-win-win good stories of, Microsoft and Amazon are both in my backyard, and they, with U.S. immigration policy, which has been broken for 20 years, they can't get people into, they can't get labor into the States. So all of our major companies now have satellite offices just 2 hours drive or a 40-minute flight across the border in Canada, which has an open immigration policy. And the exchange rate or the currency rate is quite different. $1 US is $1.40 Canadian, and it's, quote, free healthcare. So there are many benefits for businesses parking their people across the border. The president of Microsoft at our meetings, we've really been trying to get a European-style train system for many, many years. But at least we have a float plane service we call the Nerd Bird that flies from downtown harbor to harbor in less than 40 minutes, and it's working. So that's one of the benefits of the cross-border region. I think that looking at, again, the challenges of COVID, we had totally different systems of how we addressed COVID between Canada and the US. So we run a Center for Disaster Resilience, and we did a great analysis of how are we going to address the next pandemic from learning lessons from the private sector, from the public sector. And but during that time, we did have an opportunity to have healthcare workers and nurses cross the border. We're working diligently on engineer licensing, approval on both sides of the border because we're earthquake prone, and we know that if an earthquake hits Seattle, we couldn't even look at our bridges and buildings to see if they're usable, and we would need our Canadian engineers immediately. So we're looking at all of the opportunities of how do we push our federal governments to understand what a border region needs and what those, how to turn those barriers into solutions. But the great thing is going to Ottawa or Washington, D.C. with leaders from both countries with a solution. That's our byline is, global challenges, regional solutions. We're not complainers. We're coming there with, here's what we need. And that's, I think, been effective through the years.
Yeah, and very impressive. And I guess instead of a hydrofoil, you can take the nerd bird next time you go. You know, Matt, this is really. I mean, this is a hub where you mentioned different sides of the border have different opportunities. You mentioned a lot of opportunities for the American firms and their workers when they locate in Canada. What are the, just out of curiosity, what are the opportunities that they see from the Canadian side into the, is it the American larger markets?
In the innovation space, it's capital flow and working out the opportunities for greater capital flow. And so, you know, that is an area that we're really looking at because the U.S. side has so much more capital for startups and for
VC and
innovations, right?
Great. So yeah, everyone's got to have something that they
Absolutely.
win. Yeah, so that's what they're going to the U.S. for. Excellent, Eliane. Limburg is an innovation leader. The European scoreboard. I had the pleasure of working with the province many years ago, also looking at all of its amazing innovation assets, both research firm, but people that are located in Limburg and the cross-border area. How do you see this cross-border activity as really helping to reinforce your innovation leadership as a province in the heart of Europe with a lot of strong innovation assets that contribute to economic growth in a region that had some transformations over time. And so it's a region that's seen quite a bit of change. So tell us a little bit about this sort of nexus between cross-border and innovation success that you see in Limburg.
It has been a question of hard working and also keeping addressing the fact that we are one region with more borders to our Dutch government, to our own government, which means that if you really want to explore and harvest all the potential in this area, in this region, it's important that they know that the cross-border region needs other focus and needs some other possibilities in law to really are able to harvest the potential that is in the region. Now, a few years ago, and that's on the Dutch side, there was a very interesting study being done called Every Region Counts. So what the Dutch government did 10, 20 years ago, they said, well, let's invest in the very good economical points in the Netherlands, and then all the other, there will be an overflow, and all the others will, well, they take also some points, and they have all the also revenues from that. And there were very good researchers that said, well, you were not able to go from good to great, actually from good in the sense of you did not succeed in that thing that you would like to create. So there is at this moment a focus on every region counts. And for this region counts, I also say, well, every European region counts, and also the cross-border regions. So the line, we cannot take away the lines. The lines are the lines, and they will stay the lines. But please focus on the fact, please focus on the potential that the people are in the area, that live in the area, or the businesses that would like to invest in the area, for what reason or another, they are able to really harvest the potential that they would like to harvest. Well, and that's the focus that we use in our innovation policy now for 20 years. So the good thing is that from the regional government, also when politicians changed, they did not change that vision. They kept to the vision. They said, okay, let's be focused on the potential that is in the region and that we might harvest. And that means that from an acceleration agenda 15 years ago, we came to the concept of Brightlands and say, okay, what is the region good? We have a very strong chemical site with 800 square kilometers, which used to be one of the coal mining regions in the south of our country. So focus on what is a really strong, what do you need to become stronger? And now they say, okay, now we have to shift towards the circularity and also shift the chemical side to circularity. And then what is important, that you all have the same message. So the businesses, the local government, the central government, everybody has to say send the same message also towards the central government. And then you're able to create an investment volume that's interesting also for other businesses to invest in your region. Now, what we saw the last 10 years is that in Aachen, around the university, which is one of the biggest universities in Europe, technical universities, there were investments about 2 or 3 billion euros on a campus. In Hasselt in Belgium also very many millions in Genk as well. And in our region, we invested many hundreds of millions of euros in this innovation infrastructure, with a combination of education, knowledge, businesses, but also people. So the quadruple helix is important. To give an example, if you want to change your chemical industry towards circularity, that also means you need to get garbage in. Plastic garbage has a new resource. But that brings also hinders for people who live there and are used to the trains with oil which come by, and now other things come by which has a smell. So you have to you have to be aware that you take also your community, your region in that new development. So it is a very integral, holistic approach, but keep addressing the fact that we are a cross-border region on a central level. And that is something you have to keep your backbone strong. And also, if there are another political wind, don't go. So there are some elements that change, but you have to, keep your back straight, in straight line.
Great. So this sort of long-term committed vision that counts across the border in its thinking is something that has helped contribute to your success. Ricardo, the EU has, you just got a new government. You also have had several big reports on the importance of competitiveness and the relationship, its sort of positioning within the sort of global space on competitiveness. How do you sort of view cross-border as one of the pillars of this competitiveness agenda that the European Union will be actively seeking to address in the next administration?
I think that cross-border is one of the key elements for the success, precisely because it brings the capacity to exploit the full elements of the territory. At the same time, the new priorities are being designed, the new commission is being set, the decisions on anything are not taken, so we simply need to see how it will evolve. There is a new parliament, there is a new commission, there will be new priorities, let's see how it evolves. But I think that many of the interesting elements is precisely what's already on the plate, because many tools are already in place, many tools are already being proposed, are already being negotiated, that have or could have a huge change for cross-border territories. In the end, is this element that you are pushing for of resilience, of a continuous message. Let's assess that the border region is a border region and not just the sum of two parts of one side, of two things. Let's stop looking at the other side as an enemy or as a foreigner, etc. I would put the emphasis on 3 tools. I would bring 3 tools that we have on the plate, and frequently they are not well known. One, the most known, is Interreg. Interreg is a funding scheme. It has been the trigger for cooperation. It should continue, and it should be understood also from the beneficiaries of Interreg that there is also the possibility of including cross-border cooperation in mainstream regional programs. Interreg is just a little part of cohesion policy, but in the regulations, there is the potential for cross-border cooperation to be funded by regional programs. And this is something that is very often unexploited. The second element is what we have, which you made a reference to it, is the EGTC, EGTC, European Grouping for Territorial Cooperation. One of the challenges of cross-border cooperation is trust on my neighbor, trust on the other side. And one of the challenges that comes with trust is when you have a change in political cycles, the trust that was there may be lost. We need to have, for having resilient cross-border cooperation, we need to have resilient governance structures. That is, we need to have entities that are neither of the nationality of this side or the nationality of that side. European Grouping of Territorial Cooperation is precisely this tool to allow creating legal entities that are above this side or the other side. This brings resilience to many flows of cooperation. And finally, the last one is the acronym FCBS. It stands for Facilitating Cross-Border Solutions. So what's the solution that we have? In many cases, there is the goodwill, there is an obstacle law with a bridge. You were talking about the engineer for the bridge. There is a point, Germany, Czechia, Poland, they want to do a trilateral bridge that would have a significant support for that territory. It would also be symbolic. Problem is the certification of the engineers to sign the projects that will be accepted on each side. Doesn't fit with national legislation. There is the political will, there is the funding, there is the commitment, but there misses the legal tool to allow for the derogation, the needed derogation, applicably only to that specific project. What we have been proposing is precisely this legal tool. We have on the table being discussed in the Council now, we have on the table this proposal for European regulation that is facilitating cross-border solutions, FCBS. This would create the legal tool within European law that would allow stakeholders in border regions, like Greater Copenhagen, to push for a solution at national level for a specific problem on that territory. We simply hope that member states that talk about cross-border cooperation will also support the regulation. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So lots of different opportunities to think about in your different EU cross-border areas. Rolf, anything you want to add from across the Nordic countries and the different ways that Greater Copenhagen and beyond can help maybe be more integrated, work together for greater competitiveness?
Yeah, I think Ricardo had a lot of good points there. Actually, there are 12 cross-border committees working in the Nordics right now, and they are doing a great job in trying to make increased mobility, awareness between borders to increase this labor market regions like we have done here in Greater Copenhagen. And I think it's an important lesson to be learned because when the bridge was built, we heard previously from the other panel that the number of commuters went from around 1,000 up to 20,000 a day. And that meant that we increased the labor market region. That, in theory, then makes it better possibilities for companies and organizations to match their jobs to a greater labor market. That's good for all, but the problem is that you can't do that but also increasing the possibilities for people to take those jobs. So that means that transport, housing, these things will be even more important going forward. So if the Freedom of Movement Council is very successful, the mismatches will decrease and the number of unemployed people will go down even more. So where will we find the people moving here? Because what we see in every region, every municipality in the Nordics, more or less, is that we have a scarcity of labor resources. Mm-hmm. So we need to think about international migration, how will we train, how will we do all these things. So it's a never-ending story of interesting challenges, you will say. But we need to have focus on, I would say, for Greater Copenhagen, on regional and urban planning, making the transport system as efficient as possible so people can move and live as easily as possible between in the region. And try to look at this, how can we make people coming here from other countries be successful here locally? Because the language barriers are, as we heard, large between Danish and Swedish people, but even more so if you are not a native speaker, so to speak.
Great, thank you so much. So I think we have a few minutes for questions from the audience, if there are any. So again, I can't see easily with the lights, so if my colleagues who are helping to manage the microphones can just see if there are any hands raised. You can learn about what are some of the European programs, what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, how province of Limburg has been so successful. So feel free to jump in with any questions. Don't be shy. There's always that icebreaker question where somebody doesn't want to be the first. There we go. We have a volunteer. So let's get our first question. We should give a prize for whoever gets whoever asks the first question. We'll have that in our next forum. We'll make sure that we make everyone know. So great.
Thank you. This was very interesting. In each of your cases, I submit there's something underlying why you've been successful, and it's something to do with the starting gate. That is very difficult for most organizations and most geographies to operate within. What is the special circumstance that was the spark that started it off and kept it going when things were dark?
Great, and could let everyone know where you're coming from.
Oh, Amy Glassmeyer, USA.
Great. So, go ahead, Matt.
Okay.
Jump in.
No, that's a fabulous question. Our organization was really came from the bottom up. It was, was never started by any federal government, but the state and provinces got together and said, we have to do this. And to Ricardo's point, wisely said that we have to have all parties involved in the governance. So our governance is all political parties from each jurisdiction. And so there's continuity. When the government changes, people have been at the table, and it's been incredibly valuable to me as the CEO and executive director that we had that continuity. I think, the fact that we weren't looking to get the federal governments to give us money or anything, it came up from the ground. And I think that's been a key to our success. And it was created in statute in each of the states and provinces, which also gives us an opportunity to access legislative staff and all kinds of benefits from that.
Great. Elian, maybe you didn't necessarily have Microsoft or Amazon within the province of Limburg, but you built on what you had. So I don't know if you want to sort of talk also about maybe the evolution of Limburg, because it's not the capital city like in Greater Copenhagen, where you have a national capital, for example.
No, but we have Maastricht with the Treaty of the European Union, and we have André Rieu. So coming
There,
from Maastricht,
so you work with what you have there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what started it? It is the feeling that very more kilometers away from The Hague and Amsterdam, in the Limburg, we said, hey, we are not heard. We are not seen. Do we count in the Netherlands? That's the first thing. So, hello, we are here also. The second thing is we feel very much connected with the people in the region. As I said, we don't feel strangers to each other. We feel there's just another citizen living in another village, which is just the same as us. We speak the same dialect, but it's another nationality. So when it came together, that were the key elements. And then it's always the same. When you start something, you need a critical mass of people that say, okay, we are going to put power and money in it, and we're going to kickstart it. And then, of course, there were difficult moments when new politicians come, when you say, "Ooh, we don't have enough money anymore." But then you keep on going because you created this legal entity, or this, and then you say, okay, well, so that the fact that you need some structure, also from the legal side, helps you then to overcome some situation, and they said, okay, there is not so much enthusiasm anymore. And it came often, sometimes came more from the German side, sometimes more from the Dutch side, sometimes more from the Belgian side. So there was always someone who said, listen, this is our region. We have a lot of power in the region. So that's the answer to your question.
Great. Other questions that you might want to have before we wrap up? Any other quick questions in the audience? I can't see. Okay. There was one other quick question there. I think.
There is one on the top.
Okay, great. And then while we're waiting for that question, I'll let everyone get ready for sort of their kind of final couple sentences lessons that they want to share for to close our panel. So the last question.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting debate. It's a question, I think, for Matt and Elaine, because I think I come from the city of Copenhagen, working with retaining international talent coming to this region. And I think that if I should emphasize one thing, it's culture, that we are somehow very open-minded for international people. Then again, we see people being very alone after work and things like that. And Elaine, you put it very well, saying everybody here is friend regarding where you come from. And I think, Matt, you also are a multiple society. Could you elaborate a little about what role does cross-border regions play in attracting international talent?
That is the key, is the competition for talent in the world. We haven't talked about inclusivity here, but our indigenous people are so important in the Northwest, and both the First Nations throughout Canada and our Native American people. And when our leadership addressed economic development, especially looking in the rural communities, they recognized that, it's the indigenous people who are the ones who never leave the land. And they're not interested in a startup that they can sell to Silicon Valley and retire. They're interested in real solutions for their people. So integrating those voices was really important. It's not really an answer to your question, but the culture, we are fortunate to have one language between Canada and the U.S. and there's legally there is no border for the First Nations and the Native Americans. We just put that line there, but they don't recognize it, and that's a fascinating legal issues that we also are working with. But anyway, I think you're right. The global contest for talent is really the issue, and I loved the starting video because it's really about what are young people looking for. They want to make a difference in their life. They want to have a quality of life. They want to understand and feel nature around them, and that's so critical. So anyway, congratulations to Greater Copenhagen. My son came over here and married a Dane, and it's so we're really being steeped in the great Copenhagen model of well living. Anyway, thank you.
Right. Did anyone else want to come in on that question, or?
Yeah, maybe shortly. Yes, I already spoke it. You have music bands, you have all kind of cultural activities. And what we do in our EGTC is that we say we foster them. So we have also in Intrec, we have a program called People to People. in which if you have a brass band on the Dutch side, on the Belgium side, on the German side, you create one activity per year and you get a few thousands of euro of funding to really do it, to foster this cross-border, also cultural activities that people get to know each other. Because when you're happy, it's HYP, it's a house, it's work, and it's a partner. So if you have that, you can create your broad prosperity. But that means that you need to have the circumstances yet you can become happy on the place where you are. And then you can also say, okay, this is the place where I would like to contribute to economy, to the world, etc. So that is, we are very much aware about that, and we foster that also. That the culture that we have, and let's be honest, that was some of the speakers in the first round as well. They said, well, accept that people start to talk English. That's true. And when you go into Maastricht and you are on a terrace and ask for a glass of water or wine, you will be served in English and not in Dutch, and especially not in our own dialect. That's the reality. So, but it is important that you have focus also on the fact that the people have a life after work. So, and that's with this kind of programs we try to contribute also on that part.
Great. Anything that makes a quality of life, that makes it an attractive place for workers and their employers, I think, is a big lesson. So, I mean, we heard a lot about long-term visions, trust, solutions orientation, the positive narratives. Anything else that you all want to add as we close out this panel on great ideas for and lessons for success for cross-border collaboration?
Well, I just love Martin Guillermo, who works with the cross-border associations across the EU, and I just think there's nothing more important in the world today than overcoming misunderstanding and building trust. So I commemorate all of you, and I'm so grateful to be here.
Great, thanks, Matt. Ricardo, any final thoughts?
Just one quick moment of publicity.
Told you he had his books.
I talked about studies, accounting, and so on and so forth. This is a catalog of publications. It's outside. Take a copy. Everything is digital, but take the catalog. A wealth of information is there. We have one major report which is adopted by the College of the Commissioners, so signed by all of them, which says, the title is very telling, European border regions are living labs of European integration. This is the element where we stop looking at the other as enemies and we start looking at the other as my neighbor and my fellow. I tell you one cultural story that is very touching to me. I'm Portuguese, and in Portugal we have a saying, a very old saying that I heard from my parents, from the older generation. The saying says is, from Spain, neither good wind nor good marriage. Exactly like this. Neither good wind because when it comes from Spain, it's from inland, it's dry, so it's not good for agriculture. Nor good marriage because in history, a few centuries ago, for an issue of marriage of a king with those issues of heritage, etc., for a few decades, we were ruled by Spain. This is the history. This is history element. And the thing is that this sentence passed to the culture. And this sentence illustrated the mistrust. The beauty of this story is that my kids, their generation, do not listen to this expression anymore. De facto, this expression is disappearing. Because de facto, through European integration, through European citizenship, through cross-border cooperation, we are changing the culture and being capable to look at the other side not as enemies, but as colleagues, partners. I think this is the element. Please make sure that you do not allow decision makers to look at the border as a divisive line. The other side of the border is a continuation of your territory. This is the key element. Thank you.
Great. Eliane, any final words? And again, we're grateful for our partnership with Limburg Province as part of our local development forum.
Thank you. Yeah, last week we started in the Netherlands with remember 80 years of freedom. In the region where I live, American soldiers liberated us after the Second World War. And those moments that you do realize, I realized what the value is of freedom and democracy. And that goes very deep, and I think we have come a long way. And on the other side, the reality is that we have giants in the world. On the one hand, China, on the other hand, the United States, and we're in Europe in between. So my call is, my plea is, don't focus on policies on a stamp, but focus on what is the reality and what can we do. And if you then in that larger focus see what the potential is in the cross-border regions, then please make sure that we realize that if we really want to make the difference in Europe, we need the contribution of the cross-border regions. So, and that is something I would like to, I hope that in the coming years there will be more focus and also more opportunities for the cross-border regions to really are able to valorize and harvest the potential that they have.
Great, thanks. Ralph, any other comments? We're going to close out.
Very eloquently put of all of you, but I can add some more things. And I think that we are standing in front of a lot of challenges in society in different ways. Demography is one of these, declining fertility rates and so on, all aging population. And freedom of movement and having this, now we are celebrating 70 years of common Nordic labor market. Keeping those borders open, making it possible for people to move across countries can be a buffer, can be some kind of way of easing out the strains which become on the different societies in different parts of the Nordics and also in Europe. So I think it's more important than ever that we continue to work this freedom of movement, freedom of opportunities to work and live wherever you can in Europe.
Great. Thank you so much. So before we applaud, the entire panel collectively, I just have a couple of quick logistic announcements. So first, you might all be hungry after our great panels here. Lunch and the local initiative marketplace, where you can learn about lots of different innovative programs, will be right outside this room. So as you exit, you'll have access to that. Just to let you know that the deep dive session, so the next round of discussions where we'll be in smaller groups, will start at 1:15, and that will be on the ground floor. So I think we're on floor 2 here, and we have to go down to the ground. Staff can help guide you if you need support for that, but hopefully you'll be able to network over lunch, check out some great programs from the local initiative marketplace, and then join in the deep dive session. And then for those of you who are with us tomorrow and have luggage and will be leaving directly from the airport, because the UN city has some extreme security considerations, we need to be very conscious of that. My colleague Nicola, who I'll just ask to step up here so everyone can see Nicola, if you do have an issue with bringing luggage to the discussions tomorrow, and then we'll be leaving straight from there, please come see Nicola and she'll help you so that we can get you all set up and make sure that we get your luggage together. So I think we had a wonderful morning. We see, of course, how the border actually creates distance where there's natural proximity, and a lot of our work is to try and figure out how to accentuate the proximity and overcome the distance that we have created with our borders. And so really just if we can applaud the panel collectively for all of their contributions. And we wish you a pleasant lunch and exploration of our local initiatives marketplace. Thank you.